One of our favorite people is with us today, and we are very excited about that. Andy Carluccio of Zoom. This daily show that we've been doing now for 4+ years has leveraged Zoom technology from day one, and it's no exaggeration to say that without Zoom, we would not have what we have here. And so I'm delighted to welcome Andy back to bring us up to date on all the Zoom technologies. Andy, great to see you.
Oh, good morning, Bill, and everyone on the panel. It's great to see you again. And I'm excited to be here today to share a little bit about what's coming next for some of our production tools.
And we are excited to hear about it. For those of you who, I don't think there's anybody watching who doesn't understand Zoom, ZoomISO, OSC. We've been really immersed in these technologies and have really made office hours, this daily show, what it is. So what are you here to talk to us about today, Andy?
Sure. So I have some exciting updates on our production tools, specifically ZoomISO, ZoomOSC, and our Tiles application. And I want to share a couple of what those features are. And to do that, I'm going to have some visual aids here with me on some slides here, just because these are pretty visual tools, so it might be helpful for me. So I want to show you some things that are coming. They're not here today. And so for that reason, I just want to put our safe harbor on screen for just a moment. Forward-looking statements governed by our safe harbor policy, but these things I expect to be available in the next week. So let's talk about them. So ZoomOSC, an awesome application for gaining control of Zoom from third-party surfaces. ZoomISO, getting the individual audio and video feeds at HD quality into production tools. And Tiles, our new tool for being able to compose gallery views with customized parameters and designs that control your experience and kind of put the audience right into the event. So what's new? So ZoomOSC is gaining controls for polls. So via OSC, you'll be able to interact with our poll system to be able to survey your audience and get results back. On ZoomISO, we're introducing a heavily requested feature, which is the ability to export interpretation audio from many different interpreters who are in the Zoom system, including custom languages. So you'll be able to go into ZoomISO Advanced Audio and output all the individual interpreters to individual channels. And this is great, especially for systems where remote interpreters are in use and you need to get their audio back on site for people who are in the room. They can just be brought in remotely, interpret, and pass that back through ZoomISO.
Whoa, I'm going to stop you there for a second. Okay,
warning.
My brain just popped open there for a second. So anyway, number one, does it really support Klingon?
So you can go in and define customized languages in Zoom. So you have 9 default languages, and then you can actually set up to, I believe, 25 custom languages, and then they show up right in Zoom. So you can assign an interpreter to a language channel that we don't natively support.
So, and I apologize for interrupting you here, but I just want to kind of totally understand what this means, because we work with a lot of interpretation. Obviously, we have some partners that do a lot of interpretation. So you can have 10 interpreters or 15 interpreters, and they're all in Zoom watching the show, doing their own interpretation. And then you can pull individual feeds from them. And then mix them however you want to mix them as you do it. Now, the question that I have there is, if they're all in Zoom, how do they not hear each other doing the interpretation?
So Zoom has an interpretation feature that allows you to actually assign them into their own audio pods. So only people who are in the same pod will hear each other in an interpretation environment. And what's nice about this is that for a lot of regulatory reasons, you often have interpreters who work in pairs or in small groups in order to take breaks.
Because they usually break every 20 or 30 minutes.
Exactly. So the benefit of this is in ZoomISO, you're assigning based on the language channel. So you don't have to actually care who the individual interpreter is. When they hand off each other, there's no configuration changes needed in ZoomISO. It's listening to the language channel. Anybody who's in the language channel can hear that. And then Zoom attendees can also choose to listen in the meeting to that language channel as well. So really, the benefit for bringing ZoomISO into the equation is if you have to get this back on site, let's say you're doing something where you have an on-site component and you also have your virtual audience, but you want those interpreters to be brought in remotely. Or maybe your event is entirely on site, but your agency for interpretation is coming in over Zoom because you don't have to fly them in and do all of that stuff. You can pump the program into that meeting, get all the individual channels of languages up to 25, and bring them back on site. And that can go into earpieces, belt packs, whatever you need to do back on site over any of the advanced audio systems like DANTE that we support.
Oh. Sorry, I'm just like that.
Light bulbs going off.
I just want to make sure people understand how big of a deal this is. This is just, I mean, it is so difficult. If you look at something like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I think that they do 18 or 20 or 22 languages, and Being able to have them all just in Zoom, doing the interpretation, having that feedback into, like, you could take it back in over DANTE, pass it into your mixer, have any control over it, being able to drop it, then re-embed 16 of them per SDI feed, put them up in AWS, split them all out. Like, those are the kind of things that you could do inside of production, including being able to do it on site. And getting interpreters on site is such a challenge, and that is truly groundbreaking. I just want to make sure people understood like how complicated this process is for many of us, and this solves a lot of it amazingly well. So
it's one of our most requested features. It required architecture updates all over the place in order to do, because there's no Zoom client, right, that can listen to multiple channels of audio simultaneously. Why would you ever want to do that, right? Well, we did, and we put it in the SDKs. So not only can ZoomISO do this, third parties could extend this as well. But
that means that you're passing a lot more channels than the 3 channels or whatever. You're passing lots and lots of channels through the subsystem.
That's correct. So I believe there are 25 channels that are configurable. These are
all at the same time, because we usually did. It used to be less, right?
Well, that's different. So the main meeting audio is one plenary pool. So like right now, we're all in the meeting audio. When you activate interpretation, it creates additional audio pods, and enter those pods, hear the main meeting, can speak back, and then attendees can listen to a mix of the meeting pod and the interpreter on their phones. And what ZoomISO will do is just get that raw interpreter audio.
And it enables more global reach of your content regardless. That's pretty impressive.
Could you use that to pass comm information?
We've seen some people do things like that as well. Right. So that is, because you can define customized languages, maybe you speak production, maybe somebody
someone else speaks camera. Someone speaks camera. Some people speak
It's an NC-17
Some people
language.
Speak IFB. Yeah, exactly. Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. I'll back to our regularly scheduled program.
No, please interrupt. I would love this should be a conversation. Absolutely.
Wow.
Back to ZoomISO. So the other thing that we've done is we've improved the quality of the entire audio pipeline. So you have participants in Zoom who, when they use original sound or when they share music into their Zoom meeting, Zoom will actually transmit that at 48K. Now ZoomISO will be able to preserve that audio at 48K and output it to third-party systems. So today, if this is just a drop-in replacement for you, you should see a noticeable increase in audio fidelity that exports from the ZoomISO system, either when you're using advanced audio or when you're using audio embedded in ZoomISO outputs. If a participant does not support 48K audio, we will automatically convert it to 48K for you. So if you've got somebody who's coming in either because they have a audio profile that doesn't support that, or they have a shaky internet connection, or maybe they're on mobile, you don't have to worry about this. All the audio conversions are taking place inside of the app, and now it is standardized around 48K, which also works nicely with downstream systems like NDI, as there are some NDI decoders that will only support 48K audio and not support 32K audio. And then finally, unique speaker. This was a feature that we introduced in our last update, and now we're expanding it on the video side as well. And this is for workflows where you have a wildcard. So what I mean by that is maybe you're extracting 2 panelists, and then you're going to have a Q&A session with everybody else in the meeting. And what you don't want to have to do is quickly run around and try to figure out what person you should put on an output. You could search for them, of course, in our participant management tool, but that can be clunky, especially if you're only finding out a few moments before you need to see them who we're going to be talking to. Now, you could use active speaker, but the problem with active speaker is that when one of your panelists speaks, they're going to be duplicated across the isolated output of that panelist and the active speaker. So what unique speaker does is it does kind of like a mix minus for video. So it will take active speaker minus any of your other outputs, and then it will assign that to the box. So if we're having a back and forth conversation now and Alex were to take over and I was the question asker, what we would see is I would stay on that unique speaker output even though Alex is speaking. So it hangs kind of on the last person who spoke while the others are taking place. That's the big change for unique speaker. We had it on advanced audio. We had a basic version of it on video. Now we've kind of fully fleshed it out, and that's available in the 2.3 version.
That's huge. I know that I ran into that. My wife does we do this where we're all kind of, it's very controlled, and we're all putting, we're a panel. And when I saw this limitation was really when I was looking at what my wife was doing. I was trying to use ZoomISO for it, and immediately ran into this where you have teachers and you have students, and the teachers are all, coming out in ISO, but the students, suddenly you're locked up. You can't get to them. And so this is it really does make a huge difference in being able to produce the event.
Yeah, it was a great feature request. On the tile side, so this was also heavily anticipated. the ability to customize overlays. So name tags, of course, but we wanted to do a little bit more than just a, kind of a semi-transparent gray card with text on it in our own default font. We actually give you a full editor suite for how you want the name tag to be controlled. The data for the name tag is still pulled from their Zoom meeting name, but the styling is completely customized by you. Not only have we introduced name tags, but we've also introduced overlays for reactions, raised hands, and meeting feedback. So one of the things that you could do, for example, is you could ask your audience a yes or no question, and they could hit the feedback option, and you could have a large icon draw on screen, and you can control its position, its height, what type of icon it is, whether it has the text associated with it or not. You have a full customization tool for the overlays. It's also nice if you're going to have a moment where your audience is going to engage via a reaction, you kind of throw it to them. You can see all the hearts and sparkles and icons kind of pop up over these tiles and then go back away, and you can control the timers for all of that and how it should be controlled. But we really wanted to give customization of these overlays, so this is something that's been special to us, and we're really, really excited to introduce this. It's interesting because I think the primary use case for this will actually be when the tiles are in front of the presenter versus behind them. So we have some people, right, who are using tiles to show a large audience behind their presenters. We have other people who are using tiles to put the audience in front of the presenter to make a more intimate interaction between the presenter and the audience. And now being able to see their names and call them out by name, or be able to see how they're reacting to things that they're saying, can help energize the presenter and make that connection really exciting.
One question there is the so a lot of us use identifiers. So whether it's we have things on top of their names that are there. Will it show all of that? Is there any way to have like something like after the colon, don't ignore this, or after the because the problem is, like, for instance, in this one we all have numbers. We are just a number, and that would theoretically show up in our lower third.
It would. Now, typically, we're seeing this feature mostly for audiences versus for panels, but
right.
That is a good request to be able to do some sort of substring operation on the name.
Yeah.
If there is a standard way of stylizing the names. Absolutely. The ability to use multiple tiles computers together for super large galleries. So if a single computer can't cut it for the number or resolution of the output that you're trying to do, you can now work multiple tiles computers together by designating a range of participants that each one should be responsible for. This allows you to avoid duplication while still using multiple computers. As anybody who's worked with more traditional methods of getting gallery views on stage before knows, you're either running around trying to paginate the gallery view to different pages on each computer, which is a manual process that can be kind of intense. Now you can just say, I want this computer to handle my first 30, this computer to handle my second 30. They all agree on an ordered list of the participants, even as people join and leave.
How do the computers link?
So they don't actually have, the beauty of this system is they don't actually have to communicate with each other. We take the unique identifier for the participant and we hash it into something that we can put in an ordered list. So we take your identifier and we turn it into a string, and then we turn that into a number, and we basically sort a list. And because everybody agrees on the quote-unquote alphabetical order of this list, they can just identify different ranges in that list to work upon. So they don't have to actually communicate with each other. You just go to each computer and say, you're going to do 1 through 30, you're going to do 31 to 60, you're going to do 61 to 90, and they'll actually split that up for you.
Can you control how they sort, or is it all alphabetical?
It's not alphabetical. So it's done using the unique identifier, so it's random.
Okay. Is there a way to, you could say, could you say that there's certain people are on this one, or certain types of groups are in another one, or is it just going to grab that whole?
So right now it's just by range, but remember, this is just the eligibility for who can be on the display. You still have your other filters like video on, starred, active speakers, a new filter that we've introduced, other things like that you can actually customize beyond just this filter. So it's a stack of filters that work together to define the group.
These can the computers be remote?
Yeah, the computers can be anywhere you want. You can have multiple computers working together. What we really think, though, is going to be the popular use case is when you have multiple displays in a venue and you want to show participants across all of them, but you don't want to have duplicated participants on each. That's where segmenting the range is going to be helpful. But yeah, you could absolutely do this remotely as well.
As in, you could have one computer in one location, another computer in a completely different country, right?
That's right. And because they don't have to talk to each other to do this feature, you're just telling each computer what range of the participants they're going to take on. Absolutely. And then finally, support for Blackmagic desktop video products. So we have introduced NDI over the summer. Now we're introducing desktop video. So if you have deck links or Ultra Studio monitors, for example, you can connect these up to a Mac over a Thunderbolt connection or a Thunderbolt enclosure in the case of the deck link. And then you can see those individual ports in tiles and export your grid of participants to those outputs.
How many? You know, like so like if we connected it to a quad and we had 8 outputs, could we push 8 screens out?
So you could. Now, we're not limiting in terms of how many outputs you can do from the application. However, there are practical limits, such as how much bandwidth can this computer pull, how much processing power can this computer handle, right? So you are going to run into different, based on what computer you bring to the table and what conditions, and how many participants on each of those displays you're trying to do. That will kind of be a better determining factor. Unlike ZoomISO, where it's one participant on one output, so we talk about output quantity a lot with ZoomISO. With tiles, it really depends on the design of that grid, because you have to think that tiles has to do everything ZoomISO does, and then it also has to be a media server in the middle, because it's not only decoding the individual participant video feeds and exporting them to production protocols. In the middle, it's composing them in a custom designed canvas. And that step is an additional processing step in the pipeline.
And have you done any stress tests like with Mac Pros or anything else like that?
Yeah, we've done quite a bit. We're continuing to work on optimizations, but we are very impressed with what we're able to achieve with the app. Especially because, again, we design it for Apple Silicon, which means that we can kind of deeply get in there and optimize each step of the pipeline to get the highest performance possible on the least expensive computers you can buy.
It's interesting.
As always, if it's time for that, our panelists, or not just our panelists, but our viewers have questions. Is it time? Let's go, Alexander.
Let's have Andy finish this a little bit, because I want to look at some of the questions. Did you get?
Yeah, that's the end. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
That's it. That's all we did.
I just want to make sure that we're
sounded like a period to me
related to the announcement too. So, but yeah. Anyway,
do you want to reorder questions, or we'll start with one?
Go ahead. And Andy's good at cutting through things.
All right. Absolutely. Alexander, dive into our first question.
First question comes from Pedro Gonzalez in Oklahoma. Currently, 1080p is limited to business and enterprise plans. Is there any talk of enabling 1080p on Pro plans or incorporating a Pro Plus tier that falls between the business and Pro plans?
Yeah, so I can't talk about this yet in terms of what our forward-looking policies will be on resolution, but let's check in again after Zoomtopia, and I think there will be some updated guidance on resolution and account profiles.
There you go. That's the technical answer, and it perfectly satisfies me. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, I use Audiomovers Inject to route DAW audio to the Zoom AudioDevice on macOS. Is there any way to override the client switching audio output devices when enabling screen sharing?
So I'm not familiar, at least in my experience, I haven't had audio devices change. Like just now when I screen shared, my mic stayed on my M2, right? So it didn't change for me. Now, that being said, I haven't used that particular software before, so I don't know if it has some interaction with our screen sharing system. I'd also be interested in knowing if when you talk about the audio injection, are we talking about coming in via your microphone channel in Zoom, or are we talking about coming in through computer shared audio, and which device is being chosen for the shared audio? Usually that's going to be your system audio. So it depends on exactly how that's been set up. Typically for me, I've had the most success with Black Hole for simple loops where I just want to have audio come out from one application and flow in as a microphone source to another application. Or if I need to do something more complex, I would look at Loopback. And then I've used Loopback with Zoom, and that tends to serve me well too.
Next question.
From the QR code, Gene J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois. Andy, the site says to ask about this, what clothes work best with the technology in Zoom?
I'm not sure what site.
What if it's Moray? He's worried about Moray on weird shirts and things.
That's what I was going to say, Bill, is that, I don't have, I think Moray is probably the most obvious one that comes to mind. And just to recap, what you don't want is a lot of lines really close to each other that the encoder will kind of show as like a shimmering almost when you look at it from there. And this is going to be true for a lot of different tools versus just Zoom for transport, but I think it definitely applies here as well. So you want to look for either large, like solid color shirts, or something that has larger blocks of color, and then try to avoid those like really closely aligned stripes, and then you won't have the shimmering effect.
And as in my experience, that also changes as you upgrade cameras and things like that. Put out more resolution in your signal. That distance changes. So a shirt that didn't work in SD might work in HD, or vice versa. So there's a lot of variability there.
I think
go ahead.
To look at it as an attendee would see it, right? So actually,
there you go.
Plug in on another computer, sit in front of your camera, and see what you look like to other people. And that will help you kind of guarantee, that you've made all the optimizations that are going to make sense. Sometimes if you're just looking at it locally in Zoom, we're just pasting a copy of your camera there, right? We're not actually doing all the encoding and transport to show you back to yourself. So looking at it on another device is probably a best practice.
Next question.
From the QR code, Marielle, Jusha, Miera, and Wablo is asking, Andy, you talked about going to USITT in the past. How was it this year, and what did Zoom bring to the show for office hours people and what they do? Thanks.
Cool. So yeah, I've United States Institute for Theatrical Technology. When I was in college, I went 2019 to Louisville with the University of Virginia. It was my first time at the show. And I really enjoyed it because it was a lot of live entertainment, theater makers, academic theaters, professional theaters coming together and showing what they're doing with technology from different vendors. So you'd have like ETC lighting would be there, and you'd have different rigging and automation control systems. Their Creative Connors was there. I remember that. And then we had a little booth as the University of Virginia that I had like motion tracking things that we were doing as kind of our lab project, and a little scenery robot that we built to work on things. So USITT's always had a special place to me. After I joined Zoom, I went to the Baltimore convention. I forget exactly what year that was. But similarly, it was interesting in the shift from 2019 to, I believe, 2021 when I went again. Obviously, there was something that happened in the middle there that kind of really changed the way we think about live entertainment. It was interesting to watch the conversation evolve. Now, I didn't attend this year, but I know it continues to be an interesting kind of touchstone, especially in academic theater and regional theater. So it's a great place to go if you're kind of looking to see what's the latest in what the vendors can offer for live entertainment, for in-person and kind of theater work, and to get to cross paths with some great artists who are using these tools.
Next question.
Next one's from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. Is there an easy way to associate a Zoom or a lower third name tag with a Zoom meeting attendee feeding out of ZoomISO?
Yeah, so the way I would do that is have the lower third apply in the chain of the person who's joining the meeting if you don't want to do it post ZoomISO. And one way you can do that directly inside of Zoom is with the SPX graphics app for Zoom. So inside of there, you can design basic lower thirds for yourself by just installing a Zoom app. And then Tuomo's app will actually put a lower third on the participant. And then that will show up in their video stream, and then ZoomISO will extract that. So the SPX graphics app, you can pull that up from the Zoom app marketplace, and then your remote attendees can install that, and they can interact with a basic graphic system in their lower thirds.
Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand asks, given Zoom works flawlessly on Linux, any plans for ZoomISO on Linux?
Probably not. But what we have done, and again, this has been our strategy, is to take the technology that we use to build ZoomISO and put it into our developer platform. So we actually do have SDKs for Linux that contain the functionality of being able to grab the individual isolated audio and video streams from Zoom. And there are some like server-based applications that really benefit from that. I don't necessarily know that a consumer-facing version of ZoomISO built specifically for the Linux platform would be the right move for us, based on the amount of optimizations that we do for the specific platforms that we work on. And that's mostly in terms of what to do to transform the video and how to export the video and the drivers that we work with to do that. But I think that there are certainly, if there's enough demand, we have made the tools available for somebody to build something like this if they determine that market makes sense for them.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Are there environments and workflows that ISO, OSC, and Tiles would work together, or are they designed more to be independent systems?
Well, they certainly are designed to be part of a family of production tools that help you in various situations that you might run. And so I can definitely see and have used all of these applications together at the same time. One of the things that's interesting to know is that ZoomOSC is actually built into ZoomISO. So if you just need the OSC functionality in addition to what you're doing with the video side, you don't have to separately install ZoomOSC and ZoomISO. You can run all the same OSC commands in ZoomISO that you would run in a standalone ZoomOSC, but the standalone copy is still available to you should you want to just install it in the application where you are focused more on control and less on dealing with the video pipeline itself. So that is available. Tiles and ISO work nicely together as well because you can extract, the featured presenters that you want to be able to, put into some sort of source, but then you can wrap them around, your audience that you can grab from Tiles as well. So the systems do work together, and there are events that I know of that have used both of them in tandem. It's just based on what you need, right? The right tool for the right job.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida says, is there a way to pre-approve ZoomISO for streaming a Zoom meeting? Trying to avoid the host request for streaming from ZoomISO. Thanks.
Yes, in client 6.1.10, which was introduced, I believe, in August, we added the ability to allow an account owner to designate certain members of the organization, or I think of a domain, even an external domain, to have kind of pre-approval for recording permission. Otherwise, what I would say is make them an alt host, or have them be the host, or something along those lines, where they can get the permission level that they need by virtue of joining. So if, right when they come in, if they have co-host permission or better, or you've taken this route with the automatic recording to the computer permission that you can provide, then the client should be able to automatically engage the engine. But I think it's simpler just to, especially if it's somebody who's in your organization, just alt host the production account. And when it joins, it'll join as co-host and be ready to go.
Next question.
Robert Sababri in Poland says, Andy, thank you. I've been asking for the interpretation export for 2 years. I love it.
Robert,
someone's excited.
We built this with you in mind, Robert. And there's a lot of things that are required to make something like this work. And to do it the way we've done it, and to not only have it be available in our tool, but have it be available in the developer platform for any of those different vendors over the past 2 years who have adopted our SDKs directly into their products to have access to this as well. That's the way we wanted to do it. And I'm really excited to see what people are going to do with it now that you can really tie the conversation together.
So it means that, like, if you're using any of the developers, whether it's Isadora or vMix or Memo Live or other that they can get a hold of those interpretation tracks as well.
We build ZoomISO off of our third-party SDKs as though we were an external developer. And while we're the first person to use them and make sure that they work and give feedback to the team if they need to be enhanced, anything that ZoomISO can do, any third party can do. So this also extends to all of those other tools that you mentioned, Alex. They should be able now to, if their audio processing pipeline can support it, they should be able to subscribe to all that audio from Zoom.
I'm guilty of the fact that I always think the technology I use is somehow US-centric. I know intellectually that is not true, but I know Zoom is global. How much of your time do you spend just trying to figure out what's different and what's the same about a product for all these other markets and universes that you have to serve?
Bill, I do a lot of travel, actually. I spend some time in Europe, and I've spent time in the Middle East talking to customers about, what's important to them from a production perspective. And when I'm, home in America, I hear, a lot of the things that we discuss maybe in this group and, optimizations that we can make there. But when you go to EMEA or you go to APAC, what you learn is that interpretation is like the backbone of every event that you're working with out there. It is essential. And so when I go to, ISE, in Barcelona, everybody's talking about, what can we do with interpretation? How do we build interpretation systems? How do we make this stuff more ergonomic? And same when I've been to Dubai at GuiTex and talked to customers about that. The requests are very different from in the US side, where there certainly are events that take place with interpretation, but it is probably a smaller percentage compared to what happens in countries where the geography has lent itself to lots of different languages in small geographic regions. And as we expand to global reach as well, though, I think it's going to matter for everybody to have these features.
I'm going to touch on a third rail here. Just tap it. Have you guys? Whatever you can say, but what are your general thoughts on AI as 11 Labs and so on and so forth, providing some of those where you might have a core of your interpretation happening with a human, and then if you've got 25 channels available to you, you may want to be able to send that out and have the UN6 be done by humans because that is core. But there's a lot of other ones that might have 20 viewers that you might want to have as an AI solution. What are your thoughts, I guess, in general?
Well, what I can say on that is that today ZoomOSC will support live AI translated captioning. So if you just need the text, you can actually get that today and bring that into a production system that you can style and manage what you want to do with. I also say, stay tuned for Zoomtopia this year, because we're going to be talking about the intersection of AI across the platform. And these are areas of interest.
For people who are interested, Andy, can you mention when it happens so they can put it on their radar or calendars?
Zoomtopia is going to be October 9th in the Americas and October 10th in APAC, EMEA, and Japan. So for most of us, you'll watch the keynote on the 9th. You can sign up at zoomtopia.com. And we'd love to see you at the event. And we'll be using a lot of the tools that we've discussed today to actually produce our own events. And that's one of the things that I like most about Zoomtopia. Like, certainly the content is interesting and it's good to learn about what we're doing as a platform. But the way that we produce Zoomtopia, hopefully it's a moment that we can update our guidance on production as Zoom and give you some ideas to think about. Like last year, we introduced, Unreal Engine. We've now seen some great things done with that by others. We've piloted tiles at Zoomtopia, and now we've got that out available to people, and we're seeing that used by more people. So I think we're going to continue in that pattern, saying how to do more with our tools and building new tools that support, the types of things we want to try to do as well.
A lot of people want to ask questions of you, so let's go to our next question.
Mickey Makachor in Manila, Philippines is asking, for ZoomISO, is there any update regarding screen share audio arriving separately from the participant's microphone audio?
Yes, you can extract that from ZoomISO as well. So in advanced audio, there is a drop down that you can choose participant share or active screen share, and you can get the audio that they're sharing from their computer separately from their microphone channel. In the video output section, if you want to embed the audio in a video output, what you can do is identify an active screen share, which means like the most recent screen share that took place, or you can assign the audio to a participant and export that audio as well. I believe you can do up to 2. I'm actually not sure about that. On the video side, you can do 2 screen shares simultaneously and export them. I don't know if there's any mutual exclusivity on the audio share, but you can certainly export the individual shared audio.
Next question.
Samuel Nordvik in Norway asks, how does the client experience of interpretation work? Would the Zoom client on a phone work as a listening device for an in-room event where the user can choose the desired language in a webinar-like experience?
Yeah, the difference there would be if you dial in with the client, you're going to have the meeting audio muxed with the interpreter like you would if you're remote. So if you're remote and you dial into the meeting, you need to hear what you want to hear is the meeting audio ducked underneath the interpreter. So that's the way that that's going to work. What we're recommending now when you have this on-site component is that you actually grab those raw interpretation audio channels and then you can distribute them out in venue. And there's a lot of different systems that are used to manage that on site. But in Zoom, you basically pick a language that you want to listen to as an attendee, and then you're going to hear meeting audio ducked, and then the interpreter will come in and you'll hear that over them.
Next question.
Ronnie Hofsoy in Tromsø, Norway is asking, so I can just choose Klingon, output that to DANTE, or maybe embed a specific language to a specific SDI output, or...
Yeah, so any multi-channel audio system on the device can have any of the languages, including custom languages. And I'm really proud of myself for putting Klingon in the graphic because I wanted to drive home this point that custom languages are supported too.
I think
except all the Dothraki speakers are really upset with you that you didn't include that.
The Romulans are pretty upset, I think,
That's
about
right.
the whole thing. They feel like they're always the Romulans always feel like they're being put down. They have like a little chip on their shoulder a lot.
It's funny, when we tested the feature, we had a blast because we ran out of creativity on real languages to use, so we just started writing sci-fi languages, programming languages, and we filled up all 25 channels. A good day.
Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York asks, any chance of shared chat and Q&A for people in a production breakout room and participants in the main meeting?
So, I mean, if we're talking about breakouts on site, then yes, the hybrid companion join mode of the Zoom mobile app would do that. It would allow you to have the audience in the room be in the same chat and Q&A pool as the remote audience. If you're talking about across Zoom breakout rooms, I'm not sure about that. I have to check.
Does the fact that iOS and macOS and some of these things develop with slightly different pathways and things like that cause challenges? I mean, how do you feel about the iOS implementation versus the main body?
Well, at Zoom, we build custom for every platform that we're on. So rather than writing a exclusively writing a web app, let's say, that then gets wrapped onto the different platforms that it operates upon, while we do have some shared components and even some web components, we are writing code bases that are specific to the platforms that we work on. And we do that so that we are optimized for the features that those platforms make available. And that's something I'm really proud of and how we built this. And it's a lot more work, right? It's a lot easier to write once and deploy everywhere, certainly. But to get the most out of each platform, right, rather than having the lowest common denominator, being able to have the opportunity to engage with platform-specific features to offer those to our customers as optimizations, I think that's been a good choice for us in the long run.
Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand says, given distcc has been around forever, I even ported it to BeOS back in the day and distributed .NET for RC4/5 crunching too. So the distributed offloading can detect other Zoom nodes on the LAN to distribute load/processing?
Well, we have a product called Zoom Mesh, and this is an enterprise CDN tool. And what it allows you to do is minimize the number of incoming trunks into the building, and then redistribute it on the local network inside the building. So imagine, for example, you have 1,000 people in your workforce at headquarters. They're going to join the all hands from their personal devices at their desks. What you don't want is 1,000 outbound calls to Zoom's cloud to pull video into the building, because you're likely going to overload whatever network connection you've got coming in. So instead, with Zoom Mesh, what it allows you to do is minimize the number of incoming feeds and actually redistribute them across the clients that are taking place in the building to minimize the number of outbound trunks. I don't know if that speaks exactly to the question, but that's the way I think about these kind of redistribution node discovery systems for Zoom.
And is that a hardware solution or software solution?
Well, I think it depends whether you've got also a Zoom node deployed on-prem, because that can run in hardware, but I believe that this is primarily a software solution.
Next question.
Asma Gajar in Cape Town is asking, Andy, to Tile or to ISO? Although Tiles is meant for large events to connect online with audience, it seems Tiles can become part of a production workflow.
Well, that's very poetic. Asma,
Tile or not to tile? That's the question.
This is a question that we've actually seriously asked ourselves, because we have ZoomISO, right? And we have an app that is identity-based and exports individuals into production systems already. And the question becomes, well, with Tiles that has this, compositing system that makes end results that people really like, should it cross the bridge into being a tool to build panels, right? That you actually want to send and take my panelists and put them on Tiles and send them out to a screen, versus doing what we kind of imagined it for, which is more of the gallery-based experience for an audience that's not necessarily unorganized, but doesn't require you to do this person in this box has this identity, right, and is managed in a more conventional, like, super source kind of builder way. We wanted it to be more of a scalable tool that you define some properties about who you want to see on screen, and then it will do the work for you. But I want to continue to receive feedback from people about this, because as we're seeing different types of builds come together with the product, I think that will be interesting to see, does that make sense to cross that bridge and go into, an identity-based workflow for Tiles versus keeping some separation between ISO and Tiles.
We're incredibly lucky to have Hasmukh in the panel this morning, so I think Hasmukh has a question for you.
Yeah, no, I just related to my question. Andy, there's no such thing as bedding down a workflow with you. You always come up with something new that changes the way you work. So I'm quite intrigued, because I thought my workflow is quite bedded down with using ZoomISO and super sources, which the participants in the meeting can watch, but difficulty is the talent. So the talent is always looking at the grid view. And it's quite intriguing that I can send tiles to the talent to make that more interesting and interactive, especially with the lower thirds that you have now introduced. So hence my question, to Tile or to ISO. It sounds like you're saying that although they're all independent, but you can use all of them in your workflow.
I think so. And again, now that we have outputs like professional hardware outputs from Blackmagic, you don't have to necessarily choose a production pipeline based around where you can get the video feed from Tiles to go. If you've got like an A10 Mini, one of those inputs could be ISO, or even 2 or 3 of them, and then you could have input 4 be Tiles. And then you could actually choose and compose and design exactly what you want that return feed to be back to Zoom. I think there's a lot that you can do there on the flexibility side. I was really inspired by Robert, who asked a question earlier. A couple of weeks ago, he did an event where he had, in the pre-show, the audience, it was a completely virtual event. He had the audience on screen in Tiles going back to themselves so they could see each other, and the rotating effect and all the different things that we do with the queue timers and things like that to get them excited about the event. And that was a really great idea. I think that I'm excited to see more of things like that, where you're highlighting the audience, and then with name tags and other overlays, you're making it personal and interactive. And I really am interested in this idea where we've seen customers taking Tiles, putting it in front of presenters, and creating a moment between them. There's people today who are doing that with the Zoom Gallery view. Now they can do that in a more customized way that lets them more easily show data and people to their presenters that they curate and control.
Hasmukh, you want to come back?
Yeah, just since the ISO is in the meeting and then Tiles also joins the meeting, are there sync issues that one need to be aware of?
Yeah, so you should be careful about ever taking audio from one Zoom client and trying to marry it to video from a different Zoom client. That being said, if you're on the same network, this is especially if you're running on the same computer, which I'm not necessarily sure I'd recommend that, but it is technically possible. That minimizes the amount of variety that can take place. But I think that if you're primarily like, for example, now that we have this active speaker filter in tiles, what you could do is have a active speaker output in ZoomISO, and then the grid would be everybody who's not the active speaker. And you could build those together in a super source and show those to your presenters. So anytime somebody speaks, they're coming in through ZoomISO and their audio is in sync. But anytime they're just sitting there waving, doesn't matter if it's a quarter of a second off because you can't tell.
There you go. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, how do the interpreters sign into the meeting/event?
So there's two options for this. Well, from their join flow, they would join like any other participant would join for the event. But you can actually specify in the web portal the email addresses of people that you want to invite as interpreters. And when they join, they'll be assigned to the language automatically that you said in the web portal that they should be assigned to. The other option is if they just show up day of, you can actually build the entire interpretation setup right there in the meeting as the host. So you can say, these are the number of languages I want. These are who I want to be the interpreters for each language. And you can push that configuration out to them. And you can even do things in Zoom where you have chained interpretation. So people interpreting from language A to language B, which is just an intermediary for the interpreter to go from B to C. Robert has talked about that a little bit, and that workflow is also supported in Zoom.
Wow, we forget how complex that can be, translating languages across people. Jeffrey Powers, you had a question.
Yeah, and it has to do with sign language and switching out interpreters, especially if you have sign language that's being presented somewhere into the shot. How well will that work?
Yeah, so sign language, we actually have a feature in Zoom that will put the sign language interpreter in a pop-up window that's resizable. And we like this better than burning it into the video stream, because when you burn it into the video stream, what we've heard is that the people who don't need it are seeing it, but the people who need it aren't seeing it large enough. And they actually need it to be a majority of their screen. So by making it a pop-out window that can be resized, the people who don't need to see it don't see it, and the people who do need it can actually make it large enough to be useful for them. So that's obviously not, sign language interpretation is special because it's not part of our audio pipeline, obviously. So it's part of the video pipeline, and the way that we handle it there, it has to do with that pop-out window.
Next question.
John Nichols in Concord, California. Any updates to Zoom Rooms ProAV? Will the solution work in cloud production?
So the solution is currently working in cloud production every Monday. Every Monday afternoon. Extra hours. I'm excited to share more about it. I have a session at Zoomtopia where I'll be talking about what's next for ProAV. It's in the Zoom Rooms Spaces session on the 9th. So check that out. And we'll have more to talk about after Zoomtopia about ProAV.
Next question.
Next question comes from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. How might these new tools be used for an online student award show or contest where a single student out of 100s may need to be found and brought forward for all others to watch? In the past, we had to search through all the galleries and pins. Yeah,
so what I would do is use the participant management feature in ZoomISO, where you have a search box that you can type in the name, and immediately in your it's sort of like DANTE controller, if you used that before, where you tick a box and it creates a cross between the output number you want to assign somebody to and the participant you want to assign to them. So where in the outputs tab, it's a drop-down list-based workflow. In the participant management tab, it's a grid-based workflow. And then you can filter that grid based on search queries or roles. So who has their video on, who is speaking, who matches a certain name string, right? So what we've typically seen for this kind of thing is you can quickly search for them in participant management and assign them, or if they're going to actually speak to accept the award, using unique speaker, this can be all done automatically for you without any intervention. You create a unique speaker output in ZoomISO. When the student comes up to accept the award and they're not one of the panelists, they will be automatically assigned to that output when they start speaking, and you can pull that into your ATEM or any other production tool.
Next question.
Blue Melnick in Charleston, South Carolina. Is a single instance of tiles still limited to 49 individuals max?
Well, it's never been limited to 49 individuals max. It's been limited to 49 individuals per display, and you can have multiple displays created by the app. So the limitation has to do mainly with the processing power, and the bandwidth that you're pulling. So you need to allocate that individually. So what I'd recommend is if you're going to do more than 50 people, you should either use multiple displays from a single instance of tiles, or, and I think this is probably better, especially if we're getting into huge scale, use the new use multiple tiles devices feature, split it up among the individual computers, and then recomposite it in your video matrix before you put it on the LED wall or TVs or whatever it is you're driving it with. Have the load split out among multiple computers, and then as you need to scale it, you just keep adding more computers. You won't have duplicates. You'll still have full control of it, and you can basically weave together an infinitely large gallery at that point, as much as you can pull bandwidth on site. So that's the approach we prefer to take, rather than trying to cram as much into a single display of a single version of the app. We're actually building workflows that allow you to parallelize this process across multiple computers, across multiple displays.
Next question.
This one is for me. How long does it take for APIs to be updated with respect to new features so that the third-party developers can bring new features into their apps that integrate with Zoom?
Yeah, so this has been a massive area of improvement. When I was an external developer in 2020 writing against Zoom SDKs, it could sometimes take 9 months for a feature that was introduced into the beating product to show up in the SDKs that I could then introduce into ZoomOSC, for example. That's gotten down to about 2 or 3 days at maximum. I've seen maybe 2 weeks.
Wow.
So it is now, yeah, and it is because of a lot of hard work from a lot of people who have refactored the way that the SDKs interact with our core development pipeline. So you're actually, when you're using the SDKs, you're benefiting directly from the work that's been done to update the Zoom workplace and meeting clients. That work is then inherited directly at the SDK layer, and just new features are exposed. So there's usually an SDK release a couple of days, or maybe within a month of the client release coming out. That window has shortened dramatically, and that has been amazing for developers, because they get all of our latest features available programmatically to them, or at least included in their bundled clients by updating our SDKs just a few days after our client releases.
Seems like a lot of people are interested in the new features you've been talking about today. Are there any restrictions as to what kind of machines you can run some of these new things on, and what you recommend in terms of minimum configs for people?
Yeah, definitely. So for ZoomISO, we have actually a full webpage about this. It's liminalet.com/ZoomISO-performance. And at that page, we benchmarked against all of the first generation Apple Silicon devices and chips. And you can see how many outputs at what protocol on what chip. And you can see actually where the CPU is going to be at that point. You can kind of gauge based on your comfort level and your show design where you want to fall in that graph and what device to purchase. Now, as Apple has introduced devices since the first generation, those numbers have only gotten better. So if you see something in that table that looks close to what you want, and you're buying an M3 instead of an M1, it's going to be even better than what's shown in that table. And we've also continued to introduce optimizations. I'd say for tiles specifically, tiles is, again, it's everything ZoomISO has to do plus a compositing workflow. So it's going to be more compute intensive than ZoomISO by itself, which just has to decode a feed and encode a feed and do that many times in parallel. There's a compositing workflow built into tiles. So I typically recommend a little bit of a higher bump among the product line where you're going to do that. So looking at like the Pro and Max and even the Ultra chips, depending on how, if you're doing 4K galleries with high resolution participants in large quantities, we will use that additional compute power. Whereas ZoomISO, once you get to about 16 outputs, the Zoom bandwidth becomes the bottleneck before the compute power does. With tiles, you can really do quite a bit of work on the CPU, especially with all that decoding. So it's a little bit of a different animal.
Next question.
Lou Melnick in Charleston, South Carolina. Recently, Zoom released, or perhaps announced, the ability to send an RTMP feed into Zoom webinars as a camera feed for the host. Asking for a friend, any talk of this same feature coming to the meeting side of things?
Yeah,
asking for a friend.
This is actually a really cool feature, right? So if you're working in a primarily RTMP based workflow, and you've always had that separate laptop that's sitting over there on the side to take the production feed and turn it into a camera and microphone to pass back into a webinar, the RTMP feature basically handles this for you now. So you just send out another feed from that encoder or from Restream or wherever it is you're sending it from, and you can send it to multiple webinars simultaneously as well if you need to do that. So if you're trying to get the production feed out to a lot of webinars, the RTMP input feature is really exciting. I can't speak to what the plan is for meetings, but what I can say is that there are solutions today like Epiphan Connect that can receive a video feed into their infrastructure, and then using our SDKs can pass it back into a meeting that you dial it into. And then you could spotlight that and make that available to folks to see. So there are some existing tools today that can do that. The RTMP feature today is not available for meetings.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, have you had customers that want sign language interpretation at their events, even with captioning capability?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. They're not replacements for each other, right? So they're definitely sometimes used together, sometimes used separately. But yeah, the sign language interpretation feature is, and especially because I think we've done it right.
Can you outline that a little bit about how you do sign language?
Yeah. So what you do is you designate a participant as the sign language interpreter, and then attendees will get the option to summon a pop-up window that will have the video feed of that attendee, and you can make that resizable. And again, the benefit of that is that the people who don't need it don't have that burned into their video stream. But people who do need it can make it large enough to the point that it actually helps them understand the content, right? And that's, again, what we've seen is that the other solutions that burn it in right next to the production feed, they don't help anybody. That's what we've heard from customers, is that it's too small for the people who need it, it's too large for the people who don't. And so by having a pop-out resizable window, everybody can have it exactly the way they want it.
Next question.
This one's for me. Has there been any thought given to improved onboarding for users who are aiming for higher production value? I sell audio equipment to people that are looking to up their game. They're unaware of the many settings that need to be changed in Zoom.
Well, this is, I think, why we continue to invest in community education and personally participating in venues like Office Hours and Zoom Test Kitchen to help get the message out about our latest features. That's why we've done sponsored opportunities with these communities as well to try to get the message out about what we should be doing out there in the field. So while we continue to publish best practices on our knowledge base and support articles, and there's a lot of documentation that's up there, there's a great Zoom community as well, and some Zoom community champions who are members of these communities are very generous in what they do there and how they engage with us. Zoom employees also engaging there. We try to be very accessible so that we can speak to some of these best practices and workflows. And we also try to practice what we preach and continue to update that guidance as we produce our own events with these tools. But we really take a community approach with this. We think getting the knowledge out into the people who are the experts on these pipelines and letting them disseminate that to their customers, their clients, that is a community-based approach that I think has worked well for us.
Next question.
Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Is there an easier way to achieve Tiles accessibility, or is it still a Zoom 50 participant account?
Tiles accessibility. So maybe this is a licensing question. So the way that it's licensed is via the Zoom Events Hub. So it's actually pretty simple. So if you have any license on the Zoom Event platform, or anyone in your organization does, they just have to add you to the hub. And the reason we have this hub model is that the person who bought the license is probably like an IT admin, somebody on the back office side, and you don't want to have the production people have the main account controls with all the IT controls, especially in a large organization. They're not going to give you those credentials. So we don't ask for those in the app. Instead, what we do is we have this concept of a hub in Zoom Events where you can add the marketing person, the salesperson, the person who is preparing, the production tools. They can all be members of this hub and get access to the license features without actually being in the admin. And so all that we do is we say you get on a hub, and then once you're in a hub, the app will activate to the pro version. So you can. So we don't care what license you have. We don't check what license you have. We just care that the account that you signed in with is a hub host or a hub owner on the Zoom Events platform. And there's documentation that outlines how to do all this on our website.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, I remember at Zoomtopia, someone mentioned the use of the Zoom SDK to transport drone video. How is that done?
Yeah, so we've actually demoed this at a few different events. So the connection between the drone and the drone controller is whatever the drone's protocol is going to be that's going to do that link. But then usually it's an Android appliance or device that receives that video feed. And then using our Android SDKs, it receives that and transports it back into Zoom. So we had a demo at the ISE conference in Barcelona in February this year, where we were showing a drone used for disaster survey. And it's flying over site. And then you have these back office emergency responders who are looking at this drone video feed in a Zoom meeting and say, oh, we got to go over here. We got to go look at this thing. We got to figure this out on their way to get there. So that drone is kind of out there in advance. It's giving survey. It's telling them where they need to deploy resources. And they're able to kind of connect in with that remotely through Zoom by just dialing into the Zoom meeting, because we can get that drone feed out at low latency to the people who need to see it.
That's pretty awesome. I didn't even think, there's so many use cases that help so many people for this technology, and it's great to see some of those things. Excellent. Next question.
Next question is from Rian Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Could Zoom offer something like a training account? I would love to set up a Zoom tutoring for people who know the basics.
Yeah, so I think, especially on the Zoom events side, we have these pay-per-attendee licenses that are super attractive for this type of use case because, you just buy an attendee capacity for that instead of a subscription model. And if you're not actually having attendees come to the event, it's kind of like a training wheels license. You can buy a small number of attendees that will last you a full year. You can explore the features, demo the features, get access to things that you want to get access to inside of the Zoom event platform and explore it from there. Otherwise, again, joining communities that have purchased licenses to explore some of the things that can be done there. I think Zoom Test Kitchen is a great place to also go and do that. Every Friday, you can get together with David Paskin and the crew there, and you can try out different Zoom features on their license and talk about, different experts from different organizations, right? Some EDU, some House of Worship, some, individual production people, and some, direct consumers of the product who are just using it to join meetings, talk to their friends and family. They all kind of get together on Fridays and talk about this, go through the changelog, explore the features. It's a great conversation every single week to get to explore some of this stuff.
You still have the crown as the person who burns through the most questions the most efficiently for us, I think, on office hours, and you've gone through our entire list for today. Is there anything you haven't touched on that you want to kind of reinforce? You've brought up new products and what's going on in Zoom. Anything you don't think we've hit on today with our questions?
Well, yeah, we'll definitely stay tuned for these updates. We'd love to see what people think and continue to engage with the feedback. Check out Zoomtopia. As I said before, it's going to be October 9th in the Americas and October 10th everywhere else. But definitely check in for that keynote. We'll be using a lot of these production tools there. And if, I'd love to come back after Zoomtopia and talk a little bit about, how it went. The reason I'm coming in today to give you a heads up about what's coming over the next week or so with these production tools is that I'll be in prep for Zoomtopia following that. So I'm kind of coming out now and telling everybody, hey, here's what's coming, here's what we're doing, because then I'm going to be in production for a few weeks while we get Zoomtopia together. And then on the other end of that, I'd love to come back and talk about what we've actually done there and what you can go try out. And then I'd love to get feedback as well from what people thought using the tools for a few weeks as we've been working on our show.
Our team always gets excited when we hear you're coming in. So thank you for taking your time to be here. For people, and I know I've been in this circumstance before, that just as the show is ending, I come up with that, oh my gosh, question, I should have asked that. You're on Jeff's Test Kitchen coming up or something like that?
So I'll be on Zoom Test Kitchen tomorrow at noon Pacific. And we'll be talking about these updates and Zoom-related production features. So definitely check that out. And then I'm also around in Discord. So happy to answer questions when I can. Can't always get to it right away, but when I can, I'm happy to engage.
Andy, great to see you again, as always. Thank you so much for taking the time to inform our audience about all the new things that are happening with Zoom. That takes care of the show for today. Thank you all for paying attention, watching, or listening. And don't forget our Talak Traversal today. If you had gone to find the people that asked questions and answered to and that you hopefully learned from today, you would have traveled 110,000 miles. That is 177,000 kilometers, or as we love saying, 870 million bananas for scale. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Thanks for paying attention.
Thanks, Andy.
I'm just thinking about comms in Klingon.
How hard is it to caption Klingon? That's my question.
Wait a second. Clean show, Alex. Clean show.
I feel like this language feature,
Andy.
I think the language feature has particular use at a Comic-Con with all of these language choices.
I just think you have to have it where it's just like if you go you have like all the languages in an event, but somewhere in there there's Klingon, and you just put it in there, and if you tune into it, you just hear this.
Oh, I never shoot video at Comic-Con, but I have to next year, and then we have to do it like Mystery Science Theater 2000.
Well, the better thing is now you can create your own language.
Caption it.
you could create your own language and put it in there, right, Andy?
Yep, and nobody would know.
Awesome. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, everybody. Thanks again.
It's great having you.